You're listening to Data Center Therapy. Please take a number, and an engineer will be right with you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Data Center Therapy. We're a podcast from Ivoxy Consulting that talks all things IT with a healthy dose of empathy. I'm your host, Matt Yeti, and alongside me is my co-host, Mr. Matt Cozzolino.
Morning, everyone.
Each episode, we dive into the wide range of technologies that make up this beautiful sandbox called IT that we all play in. We share our hopes and dreams, opinions, both positive and critical alike, all with a touch of empathy, because at the end of the day, we all need a seat on that couch. So, okay, we have a super special episode. Maybe this is end up going to be our biggest podcast of the year because it talks about our biggest event of the year. And with all of that, the best part, the cherry on top of that Sunday on this Monday, is the fact that we have our very own Mr. Alec Taylor joining us today. Mr. Taylor, how are you?
I'm doing great, guys. Good morning.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
Good to be back.
And all this ham with a side of pineapple that you're hearing right now is definitely directly influenced by you, Alec, and your very unique and outgoing personality, and I can only hope to imitate poorly at that. The enthusiasm that you bring to these sometimes technical and dirty and
You have a lot of
IT.
energy, though, Yeti. You have a lot of
He
energy.
does have a lot of energy.
Mhm.
I wonder if it's energy or opinions. Yeah, yeah. That's true. That's true. Anyway, so before we dive in, Alec, it's really good to see you. What we're here to talk about is, of course, VMworld Redux. Redux
Yes.
or Redo. I'm going to do this every year.
The folks in Louisiana call it redo. Outside of
There you
there,
go.
I think we call it redux. Yes.
Well, Redo also works. Is Redux, is that like boiled down? Is that what Redux, we reduce kind of? Is that a play on that?
I don't know. Maybe. I don't know that was intentional, but I think that works in retrospective. Yeah, it does.
One of my friends that I grew up with in high school, his father was a nationally known lacrosse coach of the Herkimer County Community College Generals. They were a National Junior College Athletic Association member. And lacrosse, right? What do you call lacrosse? What's the shortcut? LAX. People call it lax, right? Lax. I'm like, that's not lax, it's la, and then it's a cross. Lacrosse. Is it lacrosse or is it lax?
I always call it La Fitness, but I will say
I
Hot
call
Shots.
it La Fitness too, and I find myself hilarious. Have you guys gone to that new Spanish workout place, La Fitness?
Yeah.
Really? And I called the TV show in the 80s La Law, and no one got it. I thought that was hilarious.
I've always called it Do because of Hot Shots specifically when I was younger.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And that's why we
I
work
always
in
struggled
technology.
with prefix.
Right, exactly.
You ever go to a little bistro that's got a new little menu and it's Prix Fix?
Prix Fix.
Yeah, that tripped me up a few times. Got some looks. Anyway, yes, we're here to talk about VMworld, Redux, Redo, whatever you prefer. So the registration, it is our biggest event of the year, every single year, a year in and year out for a good long time now. And registration is now open and it's free. Cool, right? So now that I've got your attention,
Let's do it.
Right. If you're able to go to VMworld, still it's a companion. It's a replacement. It's a companion. It's all of the above, right? Because you obviously can't attend every single session, so we're trying to boil all that down for you.
Kind of like the Cliff's Notes, right?
It definitely is. It's the crib sheet.
There you go.
The Alec Taylor crib sheet, sure. So, I mean, you've got over 1,000 sessions. So unless you can get to all of them, and if you can, call us, right?
If you can, where'd you learn time travel from? Because holy cow.
Yes. Otherwise, join us from your living room, and we can talk you through it. So, I really badgered Dustin in marketing to get this done, and he came through. To register, ivoxy.com/redux. I don't have to say co.com. It's ivoxy.com. That makes me very happy. And now here I am explaining it, so I'm defeating the purpose of my griping in the first place. But
you can't explain the joke, Yeti. Just
those are
removes
the best
all the
kind,
magic.
You have to explain. So we're going to have multiple sessions, and we're also going to include an episode of Data Center Therapy Live. So we're going to dive right in from our remote studios here and chat about the Redux event and VMworld, vis-a-vis, right there after each session. So October 20th, so that's 2 weeks out. So hustle up. 2 weeks out, October 20th and November 5th, 2 weeks after that. So the next month, you've got a couple opportunities to jump on board. So again, ivoxy.com/redux, REDUX. With that, Mr. Taylor, how are you? How are you doing? How have you been? Have you been busy? What's the scoop lately?
We've been busy, yeah. As the summer wound down and we move into fall, we've been really busy. We've got well, speaking of VMworld Redux, we have folks who are looking to make the migration to vSphere 7.
That's happened, yeah.
Yeah, that is happening. And folks who are diving into a lot of hybrid cloud architecture decisions. So some customers who are moving disaster recovery into the cloud. That spurs discussion around virtualizing network functions to simplify that disaster recovery plan. And simplify the integration of a hybrid cloud partner into their data center. So a lot of NSX discussions are happening.
We've been eating our own dog food there too.
Yes,
and
maybe
really
you
practicing what we preach.
Well, maybe you guys. Well, let's give you guys a shout out for the work that you've put into our all new lab that supports our vSphere class. So shameless plug for our vSphere 6.7 class that covers upgrades to 6.7. New features and functions, and parts in between. Matt, our very own Matt, with some help from Mr. Ryan Grelk and Mr. Shane Bradley, built out a brand new virtualization lab with all kinds of automation functions, using NSX under the covers to virtualize ESX hosts and vCenter servers for people to use in their upgrade labs, which is some really cool stuff. Certainly if people saw what all you did on the back end with NSX and Terraform and just how you've packaged everything to be able to pull something off like that is quite a feat. That's not an easy thing to do. So maybe
it's all the nerd knobs we get to
all
dial.
the nerd knobs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, are you guys going to do a special where you talk about that in some more detail?
I think we talked about doing kind of a series where we kind of touch on a bunch of the different aspects of it. And how we do some of our problem solving that we've had to figure out. How do we want to handle this? How do we want to address these problems? So
yeah.
Yep. It's definitely there's a lot of ways to go into it, and it's part of it for me, at least in the automation side of things. There's probably 100 different ways to do what we wanted to do.
Exactly.
Which has made it tough to a lot of times have discussions with customers and be completely behind this is the answer, because quite honestly, it's not like a hypervisor where there's a handful of choices and one gorilla that absolutely I know will work for you. You'll be happy. There are a lot more answers and solutions and ways to do it. It's kind of been tough to coalesce around this is the solution, because everybody's requirements changes the answer to that question a little bit.
It depends.
Right. But, I mean, putting the rubber to the road, eating our own dog food has given us a unique insight into the pitfalls and the trapdoors. And it's been great internally, but it also helps me have a more confident and educated insight to those discussions, too, with our customers. So it's good. It's a constant learning experience.
Yeah.
Go ahead, buy some more O'Reilly books because it's just keep up.
Well, just alone what you're doing with NSX and Terraform, I think people would learn a lot about how these technologies work on the back end and how they might apply them to, their day-to-day. Automation is a huge topic. We have an upcoming class on Ansible in the works. We'll just do the first version of that course material. So going to be a lot of automation things and next generation technology things happening in 2021. So plenty of content for future podcasts to talk about. You guys will never run out of material, that's for sure.
So for Redux, Alec, this is our, how many years have we been doing this? Like 7 or 8?
Gosh, we have been doing our Redux
longer, as long as I've been here, which is at least 7.
Yeah, it has been that long, huh?
Yeah, it's been over a decade.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so at least as long as Cosmo's been here too.
So a minute.
I guess it has been.
There you go.
Yep.
So with everything, and VMworld has obviously grown. And this year is wildly different given the virtual nature. But
Hmm.
how are you able to kind of fire up the mill in your garage and distill all this down
Yeah.
to I mean, we can all go on a blog post and kind of read the architecture
Right.
and look at that and say maybe that's great, maybe that's not. But how do you take it to that next level, and kind of turn it into a consumable menu item?
Well, to a degree, it's been, to a large degree, it's easier to do remotely with a virtual conference than it
Do
is
you
in
have like
person.
3 sessions running all at the same time and
Yeah, I mean, before it was like
two
go,
different headphones?
yeah, exactly, 9 different Bluetooth headphones. Um, you run around to the, to the talks and to the workshops, to the breakout sessions that you think are most interesting, that you're going to get the most out of being there in person, and then you have to fill the blanks in with sessions that other consultants have attended and a lot of online reading. So something
Hmm.
that's great about VMworld is there's a lot of information published, in addition to the virtual sessions, but lots of blog posts. I mean, there's goodness only knows how many bloggers. There's got to be over 50 that blog in detail about what they've heard and what they've seen. So there's a lot of watching of videos, third-party partner announcements, blog posts, uh, people who vlog about it, watching their videos, interviews with VMware executives. And so that is what I look for, are people who see things and have information that would be difficult to get otherwise, to hear their thoughts and opinions, to add color to things like new product announcements or new features and new
Hmm.
functionality and then new company strategy. And
But I think it's
yeah,
useful too, where you add that extra layer is that you've seen this company grow over the last 2 decades.
yeah,
You've seen the acquisitions, you've seen the different pieces that plug in with it. So you can kind of get you have a, just from your experience, a general idea of where they might be going with this,
right,
even more so than what they might be telling me or not telling me right
sure,
now, which helps. I mean, you seem to be a little bit of a swami with this Windows running on Linux kernel as it is, and you've been, I remember at an event some months ago you bringing that up, and then I saw that article come out this last week. I'm like, oh, we're gonna hear from Alec on this.
oh yes. So my wackadoodle prediction of 2020, um, is that under the leadership of Satya Nadella and softening on some things that were, the hill that Microsoft wanted to die on,
Hmm.
there's been so much talk around running Linux applications and even full blown Linux environments on the Windows operating system. Why would someone put that much time and effort into something like that, um, if they didn't have a larger agenda, right? Almost like that were a test platform. Microsoft has already seeded that they've exited the mobile market operating system space, which I think was a very mature decision for them to make, and have moved on and are now selling some really compelling devices. They have their new Surface line of tablet phones that run Android proudly. Microsoft makes a launcher for Android, all kinds, yeah, I know, right? All kinds of apps that run on it. And with this Windows subsystem for Linux technology,
WSL.
they're pretty serious about it. And so now I'm starting to read, why don't they just make the shift? It would make a lot of sense from a ease of development, maturity, security, scalability standpoint, um, to make Windows a Linux-based operating system, and then have Windows applications that could run, um, basically, that would run under Linux without issue.
Feels similar to what Mac OS did with Darwin,
Yeah,
right? And BSD.
they acquired Next, and with Next, Steve Jobs built an operating system, Next OS, based entirely on Unix, BSD Unix, and the very first web server, Tim Berners-Lee, wrote that for the Next operating system, and you can go to the Computer History Museum and see that Next
Oh, I
workstation
can
that he
dive
used
down
for
that
that.
rabbit hole for
And
days.
so, for those of you who love Mac OS, your little spinny pinwheel came from the Next operating system. That was
Nice.
one of the carryovers. And as somebody who uses Linux as a daily driver, it would be really fascinating to see a Windows application running natively, you know, under Linux. That would be a pretty trippy thing to.
So it is 2020, so it would be a very 2020 thing for
It would
Windows
be.
to run on a Linux kernel.
It would be.
And we're virtualizing so much, it kind of makes sense.
It
Kinda
kind of
Kinda
does.
does.
One love. It's wacky
Right?
and it's weird and it's unnatural, but somehow it makes sense, right? So
I really do.
Just, you heard it here first. I just want to put that right.
I did hear it
if
there
I'm
first.
right,
That's
you
the
heard it
thing.
here first,
I did.
and then instead of
Do you have a futures market that you lay these bets out on
Shoot.
that we don't know about or we should know about?
well, instead of coming across like a wackadoodle, I'll come across like the Swami, the prescient Swami of all-knowing. Just give it time. If I wait long enough, that will come true.
I'll just draft in your wake for these kind of things. From the flip side, if you want to invest in stocks, draft on me and do the opposite.
There you go.
You'll be set.
Whatever I pick the opposite. You will be a multi-millionaire. I like that.
That'd be a great business model, right? It's like, give me 10% of your profits
I got
if you
bankrupted.
do exactly what I don't tell you to do.
Bankrupted
There you go.
because of that podcast of yours, right? That would be wonderful. Thanks, Ivoxy. I'm broke. Yeah. So we'll just say for
Well-
legal purposes, we are not stock traders or anything like that. We're just IT guys who occasionally conjecture and pontificate. Unofficially. Yes.
True that.
So, as far as VMworld this year, Alec,
Mhm.
from what you've been able to tell, are we focused on more? I know last year was very acquisition heavy.
Yes.
Not so much from within, but from without. And it seems like this year might be the rev on that, where now what are we doing with some of this stuff, or how? And
Right.
there's still some acquisitions in there.
Yes, indeed.
Got to do some integration and make it work together now, right? Yeah.
Correct.
It seems that way.
Yes.
I mean, you mentioned vSphere 7 earlier, and I think U1 is just either around the corner or just released. And, Matt and I think we'll probably follow up with an episode dedicated to, now that we're at this milestone, is it time? Is it worth it? Because before that, it's way too nervy.
Yeah.
In a lot of our opinions. But what else we got? What else we've got going on in terms of the major? What would you consider a headliner? Because it used to be when vSphere would come out and the main features would really hit, right? Where it wasn't yet a extremely mature product. That was always the headliner. But now we're kind of past that, and now we're talking more about integrations. What would you weigh as the big headliner for this conference?
Right. Well, we could probably say I think the VMware and NVIDIA partnership is a really big announcement. So having the ability to offload data processing to NVIDIA data processing units, so DPUs, D as in David, D as in dog, is a new term. So NVIDIA makes something called NGC, which is AI processing software that's being integrated into vSphere, including Tanzu. So for those people who are running containerized workloads, this will be available, say, to leverage to basically democratize artificial intelligence processing. So, what someone might do with that kind of compute power is, of course, going to vary by application. But we now have the ability to locally run modern AI infrastructure via this partnership. You have NVIDIA graphics capability.
We've been putting a lot
VMware.
of virtualization on CPU. How do we schedule the CPU piece? So now we're kind of branching out into some more places to run some different workload types. I guess, yeah.
That's absolutely true. VMware is acquiring a company called SaltStack. Anyone who has used some of the lab virtualization technology from Cisco is probably familiar with SaltStack. For people who've used some of their test dev software platforms, right, emulating Cisco devices, SaltStack made that platform. So what VMware plans to do around that technology, their automation technology, remains to be seen. Couldn't really find a lot of detail on what VMware is planning to do with it, but it is an automation platform that might find its way, somewhere in VMware's automation stack.
It's encouraging because, as I talked about before, as fun as a lot of these technologies are, for me at least, it's the fear of the sunk costs. It's the fear of me
Hmm.
spending a significant amount of time learning it, only for it to just
Absolutely.
Yeah.
not get
Yeah.
used, not really get supported. Maybe it gets a little hot right off the bat, and then goes
Hmm.
off the cliff. Um,
You know what? Thanks for
I'm
investing all that time, but we really need to take a turn and do it this way now instead.
it's
Yeah.
Right?
it's
Yeah.
if VMware's getting behind it, Vertzilla, right? I can at
Mhm.
least be sure, or not sure, but confident that it's not just going to be stuck in a drawer. There's a reason behind it, and maybe I can invest some of my time in learning it too, and
Yeah.
feel like
Mhm.
it's not going to be a waste.
Yeah.
That is encouraging for me.
Yes.
I mean, to be fair, VMware has taken a couple of turns. So we've got like NSXV now NSXT, right? There is a pretty big shift of how you interact with that virtualized network.
Yeah. And all that really does for me is not that I blame them because they're just trying to get stuff done, right? They're trying to
Mhm.
make progress, and I'm not begrudging that. I get annoyed, and this goes for any company. Don't scream from the rooftops how wonderful, magical, this is the greatest thing
Yeah.
ever, and it applies to everything you're doing. Oh, by the way, tomorrow we're just completely starting over. Come on,
Mhm.
you're really building in some skepticism for me there. But all that being said, that's why it's kind of a version one. Okay, maybe not. I'll keep an eye on it. But when they start to really coalesce around it, so a lot of these, I mean, Salt Stack is exciting. I am looking forward to seeing what the deal is here. Um, been doing some reading on it, so that to me, again, Kaz, I mean, we had early episodes in this podcast where I was like, okay, yeah, Terraform, okay, yeah,
Right.
automation, great, yeah, show it to
I
me.
loved getting that message from you saying, okay, wait, this is actually pretty cool.
Yes.
Right.
Yep. Well, it's not so much automating things, it's standardizing things.
Right.
That is the
Right.
because if we were ripping down and building up our lab over and over again, I'm fat fingering
Mhm.
something every single time.
Oh yeah.
And if I can get out, now I know that's not a potential problem,
Mhm.
then I can shift my troubleshooting or my ideas to other areas. That is a
Mhm.
way better time spent.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
So what do we
interested to
think
see how
about
they integrate, but yeah.
I'm wondering, Alec, how you're feeling about the container game now. I mean, it's been a minute since Matt and I have talked about them.
Hmm.
We've been really focusing on the automation, the scriptability, the frameworks of that,
Yeah.
and containers at least right now. And I think because we're not doing microservices, I'm almost feeling like containers are going to end up being that. And we're not really working on that currently right now too heavily. But what are your thoughts on that with Tanzu and all those developments?
You know, I think there are going to be certain workloads, certain use cases where containers make a lot of sense, and we now observe this firsthand. It's not just conjecture or a projection. Um, there are a lot of organizations that do not see a single benefit to running containerized workloads. And I think the reason is that it's not going to be someone who manages infrastructure that's going to make the decision about whether you containerize a workload or not. It's going to be the decision of a development team that decides
Mhm.
that that is the way that they want to develop their software and deploy them as microservices, or a third party vendor or company who that's the way they deploy their platform.
Yep.
And we don't
Right.
see, outside of companies that are heavy into web services is the way they do business or the way they deliver a service. Those are the organizations that have been most interested in microservice architecture. For those who are looking to get completely out of the infrastructure game, it's all about serverless computing, right? Don't have any containers to manage. Don't worry or care what's on the back end, whether it's a traditional physical server, virtual machine, or a container. You're just deploying a set of APIs from a CI/CD train. For the workaday on-prem infrastructure administrator, we see very precious little adoption of containers because running, 2 dozen services on virtual machines checks all of the boxes. What would the
Mhm.
benefit be other than some pretty serious complexity? And when we get into how containers network and how external services access containerized workloads and applications, I think many folks would cry uncle and say, these services do not change, are not dynamic enough, nor are our applications developed in a containerized fashion. I don't want to go to the complexity of migrating a workload to containers that are running on top of virtual machines. I'm just going to leave them architected in a very traditional sense. And as cool as containers are, they don't fix problems for folks that don't have profoundly dynamic infrastructure with potentially dozens or hundreds of different services running across various REST endpoints. There's a lot of risk and a lot of complexity to how that migration to containers would go, and we don't see a lot of it happening, I think, for those reasons.
It's that same kind of thing Yeti was talking about, where here's this new tool, right? And here's this new hammer. It's the best thing ever.
Yeah.
We went through some of that with containers, and
Yep.
and it isn't. It's got a place, but it's not everywhere.
No. And
that's my thing, Kazo. You showed it to me in your lab, in that you've got a persistent data storage mount point here, and you can go from there and spin it up. Yes, you can deploy. If something fails, you just stand up another one. And my question is, why would it fail?
Right.
Because, and that's the thing. When I want to troubleshoot that, oh boy, it's just so different, so vastly different from a traditional environment that it is a learning curve and a point of resistance. It's a big speed bump for sure. Yeah. Especially if you're an old fuddy-duddy like me, apparently. I know that guy I used to point at and make fun of.
Keep off
I don't
my
have
lawn.
the old man winter. Yeah, no old man winter beard like you yet, Kaz. But I see you trimmed up a little bit.
Actually, I haven't. I've been talking about it, but we didn't get there. We went house hunting all weekend. Haven't had a chance.
Another cool thing, and I don't want to spoil the main course, Alec, but ESXi on ARM.
Yeah.
ARM is the pretty girl at the dance right now.
Yes, it is.
Between Apple Silicon and everything, but I'm excited about the potential for running ARM, in that I actually have a workload that could use it right now. Ubiquiti, who I'm using for home networking, and I would not ever advocate it for even a small office, home office. I mean, I'm really stretching it there, but I don't really care to run Cisco iOS or Nexus switches in my home. Right, not to mention cost, but
yeah, Cozolino, how do you feel about that? Don't you think he should be running maybe some 40 gig Nexus or?
Totally, you need that 10 gig bandwidth to your desktop right now. Absolutely.
He does, and availability, so he's going to want 5
nines.
Yeah, well,
5 nines in my garage.
Here's what we've told people for years: we can deliver 5 nines, 7, 8, 9, 12 nines of uptime. The only issue is we get to pick where we put the decimal point. So technically, 9.9999 is 5 nines of uptime. So just be wary when you say something like that you might run into some jerk like me who's like, oh, absolutely, I can give you 47 nines uptime. How many nines do you want?
Well, so this company has a video. I bought their video cameras, security cameras for my house, and they had a platform you could load on any Linux or Windows or whatever you wanted, and run it, store your own NVR storage, everything else. And now they've switched to kind of the Apple model, where they're wanting to sell you the appliance, and it needs to run on this. And they stopped releasing the x86 binaries of the software, and those new platforms are on ARM. And I'm not a fan of buying hardware designed to be obsolete with short hard drives and this and that. So the solution would be to have some proper ARM hardware to run it on. Well, I've got a virtual cluster at home. I want to use those resources to run my environment. I don't want this one-off piece of hardware sitting over here doing it. So ESXi and ARM could really make for a compelling expansion of the cluster. I'm curious where they're going with that.
Yeah, Microsoft has
everything's moving to the edge,
Surface.
or a lot is moving to the edge, and I think this is VMware trying to box that out.
Yeah, I think VMware is looking to ARM to be compute edge technology, right? They're getting big into 5G service delivery, and that's where they see a start for ARM technology, is lots of small workloads running out at the edge on extremely space and power efficient hardware like ARM. Yeah, I tell you, it's Intel is getting the business between AMD eating their lunch in the PC space, between the struggles that they've had with some of their yields with their newer, smaller architecture that they just, are going to be
They're
delayed.
having some issues with the manufacturing, aren't they?
Yes, the yields are way down, right? The yields that they get with their latest microprocessor architecture are not high enough to be financially viable, and they've got to work the bugs out with why their yields are so low. And you've got AMD who's firing on all cylinders. You have ARM that is now the cute girl at the dance. And whenever Apple makes a move like that, which this will be the second time they've made a massive micro architecture change. What was it, 2004-ish? I think I got my first Mac that was x86. I got one of the very first ones. And I was blown away by how well it performed, how great it was on power, and how stable it was, even running the older Motorola PowerPC binaries in emulation mode. It worked extremely well. I would imagine the same will be true of these new ARM systems. Both of you guys are Mac users. You might be hanging out waiting for your next upgrade because you want to do it on ARM and you don't want to buy an obsolete x86 platform. So I think maybe there will be a podcast dedicated to Matt and Matt now on ARM architecture.
Computer shopping.
Do you think, and you can do a full in-depth review of what it's like to run ARM as a daily driver. I would absolutely check out that podcast. So, and hopefully
it's not. Matt couldn't be with us because he can't run. There's no
exactly.
web for.
Nothing's working, right? All of our projects are backed up because we've got laptops that don't work correctly.
There you go.
That would not be good. So
that would be unfortunate.
Maybe there's a canary in the coal mine, and one of you tests it out before the rest of the consulting team entertains moving to ARM. That wouldn't be a terrible idea.
Yeti beta tester.
Right, and our customers, right, our listeners.
Kazo's a big Google fan, so Kazo lines up well with that because he's a Google fan, and everything they do is beta, and then they chuck it. And what are they on their 17th chat platform in the last 5 years?
They
or
are.
So?
That's actually becoming an issue for me now because I use Google Voice and how they do Google Voice and Hangouts and how chat's happening. I don't know. I don't know what the hell they want to do or how they want to handle it, but annoying is what it is.
Yeah. Can I just do a little detour? We don't need to go into this deep, but you mentioned it, Alec. Does anybody out there really think that 5G is even a infinitesimal fraction of the promise that we're hearing about it right now? Because to me, it sounds like Wi-Fi. It's only beneficial if you've got Wi-Fi-like distance to an access point or a tower.
Yeah.
And everything else is it's no different than 4G. So what are we talking about here when this 5G promise? What am I missing? It feels like really they put the cart before the horse, and these promises are way out there, if even physically possible.
Well, I mean, you get the same kind of thing as VMware and whatever tools, right? This is the cool new thing, but we aren't quite ready for it yet. I mean, the rollout isn't
we're talking about physical radio spectrum. I mean, this is I don't know. It seems like 5G and ignoring the fact that it causes coronavirus apparently.
It does. Old. And how else without 5G, how is Bill Gates going to read your thoughts?
Right?
That's true too.
So that's probably an issue where he's like, we need people to get closer to these 5G APs because I cannot read their thoughts well, and that wasn't working over 4G. Just not enough bandwidth for the mind control.
Yeah. There it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm eager to see some true benefits from it, but they're rushing to cram it into phones, and I'm like, that's going to help me nothing whatsoever. And
I see it as the same kind of thing as when 10 gig came around, or 100 gig, or 25 gig, right? It's slowly starting to show up in interconnects between switches, 25 gig, 100 gig. And now we're getting 25 gig network adapters. And in the next couple of years, we're not going to be selling a server with 10 gig cards. We're going to be selling a server with 25 gig cards. But we're seeing it now, right? So everyone's hot to trot about it because, oh my God, it's the next big thing. But everything needs to catch up with it, right?
I hear that, but it's like that would be, I think in the analogy plays out, it would be like, fine, we're going from 1 gig to 10 gig, but your cables can only be 6 feet long and no longer, not 328 feet, 6 feet. It's not to me, it doesn't seem like a natural expansion and a growth of a already accepted benefit. It is, there are way more trade-offs, it seems. It seems like, 3 steps forward, but 8 of them back, in a way. That's what I'm thinking, in that, whoa, okay, great. Wonderful fast bandwidth, low latency, but you have to be in visual distance of the tower. Well, that's called Wi-Fi. I don't, yeah.
I mean,
It's
Wi-Fi
really weird.
Wi-Fi doesn't do that great at roaming, right? So if we've got cell structure,
Tell that to the T-Mobile customer. Neither does the cell network, I promise you.
cell type roaming, right? Yeah, roaming between towers. I mean, right? It's, I don't know. I don't do Wi-Fi. I do amateur radio, and it kind of makes sense.
I'm looking forward to episode 376 when we finally talk about 5G is here and it works.
And everyone's talking about 7, and it's the hot new thing in the.
Well, if I go to 5G, then they're going to need to drastically increase my data cap, because I'll be through it in about 14 seconds.
Data caps.
Yes. So, what I have, I'm impressed. I'm a Verizon subscriber, and my LTE coverage is always great. The performance is really good.
Mm-hmm.
Yesterday while we were, out and about, I could stream live football. I use YouTube TV and was watching football from my phone while we were, kind of out and about. I could stay up with that, and that worked flawlessly. So, I don't know that I'm
that debate is, it's what works for you, because it all is about your geo footprint. What does my normal day or week look like?
Absolutely, yes, that is correct.
I had Verizon for a long time, and 7 or 8 years ago, it started to experience congestion up where I am, and it was getting worse and worse and worse. And my problem was, when I called them for support, they opened 3 network tickets and immediately closed them. Like, there was no, hey, look, I understand tech. Let's talk. I will give you the data you want. And they just treated me like just Joe Smith with no experience. And that is what finally pushed me away. Not so much, your cell network's suffering, because none of them are perfect, and T-Mobile certainly isn't.
Right.
So, and I opened a ticket with T-Mobile, and they're getting me on Twitter, they're this and that, and they're actually giving me, like, we're growing that tower's scheduled for an upgrade in 3 weeks, and it was, and it did. And I'm like, okay.
Impressive. That's great.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing
communication is
like.
important, right?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Let me tell you what we're doing and how we're going to fix that, and this is
Rule
what we're
of
working
thumb.
on, right? Yeah.
What
if
do
you call me and tell you we're going to be late versus not calling me and being late, vastly, same outcome,
right.
Vastly different feeling from my point of view.
Yeah. Indeed.
Yep.
Yes, a little goes a long way. Absolutely.
Now we've really gone off the rails. Mr. Taylor, it is always so great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us
We
today.
appreciate
and
it. Yeah,
again,
thank you for doing these, guys.
October 20th, November 5th, VMworld Redux, hosted by Alec Taylor, and we will be doing Data Center Therapy live afterwards, same days. ivoxy.com/redux. Mr. Kaj, you have anything to add before we wrap?
No, it was wonderful having you back on again. It's been a minute.
It's been a minute.
These are always those things where I'm like, I think we have enough to talk about. We'll be good. And then a few minutes into the episode, I'm looking at the clock, and I'm like, I hope we'll be all right. And then I finally look, we're over.
Great.
Every single time. Every single time. No,
there's still stuff left on our chat sheet, our cheat sheet, right?
We're like not even halfway down the top. Is that going to be enough to talk about, do you think?
We could we could always make these multi-part, so plenty to talk about.
That's true. Like the Smashing Pumpkins double album. But
but less musical.
Or
yes.
The Wall.
Less musical.
We're comparing ourselves to the great works of Pink Floyd. I like that. That's good.
That's Floyd.
That's really
okay. So, yes, remember, everyone, registration is open for Redux. It is free, ivoxy.com/redux. Find us there. Thanks for listening to Data Center Therapy, everyone. Have a great day.